On.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the reality show brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK. Long time no see. Hopefully you were just watching The Daily Objective, where I was on host of that. Well, today we are going to bring you, like we do every day, the practically applied philosophy of objectivism to current events. I have a great panel here with me today, Robert and Amy Nasir, Woz Art. I think some other people are going to be joining us shortly. If not, it'll just be a panel of three, and we'll have a great deal of fun discussing some of these articles. One of the articles today is a poll taken in the Church of England has shown that they overwhelmingly believe that Britain no longer can be described as a Christian nation. Well, what do you say about this? They want to start changing their rules a little bit, to start liberalizing their ideas a little bit, allowing for gay marriage, allowing for priests to have gay marriage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Does this bode well for the church? Does it mean they're sacrificing principles? Does this mean there's an end of principles in our time? Or are we heading towards a pragmatic age where there are no definitive principles to anchor ourselves to? We'll be discussing some of that, unpacking that with our panel today. Also, a recent Notting Hill carnival has had the highest crime rate of the last 7 years. There's been sexual assaults, there's been stabbings, I guess 8 or 9 stabbings in one day alone, a machete being pulled on somebody. I don't know what the Notting Hill Carnival is. Hopefully somebody from the UK will be joining us so they can talk to us a little bit about this, and if this is unusual or if this is sort of a typical Sunday in Notting Hill. There's the third article, which I didn't get a chance to read, so you guys are going to have to fill me in on this. Unexpected victim of increasing cost of living has been casual sex. Ooh, do objectivists like casual sex? I'm not. I have lots to say about this. Now, is that a bad thing or is that a good thing? Are people happy? Will people's happiness be noticeably decreased if they can't afford hookups? I say not necessarily, but that's me, and I'd like to get our panel's perspective on this. So, as I said before, joining me, I guess Robert's not with you, Amy. It's just you.
Right.
It's you,
Just
not just you. It is you and Woz Art. And who else do we have here? Let me look at the panel. Okay. Keith Weiner, how are you, sir? And Michael Liebowitz. I hope you guys heard the opening salvo. Good to have you guys here on the show. So what say you to this shift in the Anglican Church with respect to some fundamental rules, some of which even seem to contradict the diktats of the Bible? Amy, I'm going to start with you since you're first in the queue here. What do you think of this?
I think it's a beautiful thing, Mark. When I thought about this, the question is, does the Catholic Church in any of its varieties have principles? Principles are general truths, and they're truths, so they need to be based on reality. In terms of what they've been acting on, and what their religious principles have been in that sense, have been based on mystical assertions that don't have a lot of grounding in reality. And now they're realizing, wait a minute, we've taken a poll, maybe they're getting active requests from their clergy in the Anglican Church in England, that they want to go ahead and reform and change some of their practices. They want to perform gay marriage. They want to allow women into the clergy.
Premarital sex. Let's not forget about that.
Sex, yes, I believe something it was that they also wanted to denounce slavery a little bit more, considering that the Bible is, at least the Old Testament is in favor of it. So I am absolutely all for it. But I do think that there is a distinction between principles and dogma in this case. And I think that they're actually going towards more of the truth of what reality is about, and being able to be free to to marry gays, to have women in their church. I think they're going towards more of a reality basis. So that's a great thing, I think.
Interesting that sticking your finger up in the air and taking a poll of the population at large could somehow give you a clearer perspective of reality. Woz, do you think there's any contradiction there?
Contradiction between
sticking your finger up in the air and taking a poll and trying to get more people in, more butts in the seat, which it seems like that's the primary motivation of shifting their philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. They just want to keep the numbers, I guess. Well, and also they talked about priests being burnt out, and some of them seriously thought about quitting over the last couple of years. But
if there's less people in their parish using their services, how in the heck can they be burnt out?
I know, it doesn't make any sense. Well, I think they're just scurrying around trying to get the people to come and wasting all their time trying to bend reality to fit their dogma. But yeah, I basically agree with Amy too. They're not truly principles that they are trying to spread in their religion. It's, you know, like dogma and stuff. But I also think that it might be a sign of the general populace or the culture kind of starting to see that mysticism isn't or doesn't have to be the source of morality. And so they're starting to force the moral teachers to kind of bend to their will, which is probably a good sign.
I don't see that so much as the church isn't a source of morality, not necessarily mysticism. I don't know that.
True, but it could be a step in that process because the church has had a monopoly on mystic morality for quite a while now. So maybe once that monopoly is broken or whatever, then people will start to look to regular spirituality. And then when that doesn't work, they have to admit, you know, time to come to reality. But I also wonder, like, so these priests are so burnt out and ready to quit and think, you know, they're suffering a lot. Well, but isn't that part of your code? Would it be right for you to be all happy with your career and not suffer for God or the priesthood? Isn't that part of your truths? So I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting.
Okay, so we have 2-4 that this is a positive movement from Amy and Woz. Keith, what say you? Positive or negative, or a mix?
I certainly think that if gay people want to get married, they should get married, and so removing that obstacle is only upside, right? I don't have a real strong opinion about the Anglican Church, but I do want to make one point, which is that, thank God, America was founded on a separation of church and state, and the UK is absolutely married church and state, you know, together. The head of the Anglican Church is by definition the head of state, which is the king or the queen. You know, also today, of course, the monarchy has been either shifted itself or has been shifted out of power. So the monarchy isn't really running the state anymore the way it was under King Henry VIII. But boy, we have a better situation in the United States. If people want to belong to that church in the United States, they can. If they don't want to, then they can not do that. In the UK, there are political pressures. And of course, there were times when the church was very activist, and they have the term priest hole. I don't know if anybody in America is familiar with this term. People had hiding places, you know, that where you could like open a trap door on the floor and hide a priest, because when the Anglicans were in charge, was that Elizabeth's reign right after Mary? Mary was the Catholic, so they were going after the Anglicans. Elizabeth was an Anglican, they were going after the Catholics, they were killing them. And this idea that, okay, let's round up all the people that don't fit our religion and kill them, just is, you know, is horrible. And of course, so much of history has been driven by that. So,
well, ironically enough, I think America did have a state-sponsored church in Massachusetts, and several of the states did have state-sponsored churches early on after the Revolution. But you're right, we are established on a secular premises, and I think that's a great thing. But I don't think Christian conservatives would necessarily agree with you. Michael, I'm very interested to hear your perspective, because from where you've come from to where you now are, there's lots of people who are in your place who would become Christians, but you chose rational egoism instead, which is a really bold and interesting move. What do you think about this movement? Is it good, bad, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, I think that some of the concretes are good. I think it's good. Less bigotry in society, the better, right? But the other stuff, I don't really see as good, bad, or anything else. Ultimately, the church is founded on an anti-reason foundation to begin with. There's no way, in my view, to make that reasonable. I mean, just when for the church to be reasonable would mean they wouldn't be a church anymore, right? Because they'd have to forgo the belief in God, forgo the belief that somebody died for their sins. There'd be all types of things they would have to get rid of. And ultimately, a lot of this stuff is biblical. So if you do away with the idea that homosexuality is a sin, for instance, even though it's in the Bible, then you're basically doing away with the text. Now, that might be a good thing if we got rid of that religion, but then it's, well, okay, well, what are they going to replace it with? And just a quick comment on the United States. It's interesting because, yes, we're founded on separation of church and state, but America is actually, I believe, far more religious than the countries in Europe, than in England. And to pretend that they don't still have sway over the government. I mean, when candidates for the Republican nomination for presidency feel compelled to say God is real, that to me is not a good sign either.
Yes, indeed. And yes, somebody actually says from the audience, yet our money says God and trust.
Can I jump on that one?
God we trust.
Can I jump on that
sure,
one? The money
sure,
guy.
sure.
When you stamp a gold coin, it doesn't need to say God we trust on it, because gold doesn't demand any trust. It is what it is. When you have irredeemable credit printed at will by a central bank, you have to bolster the the paper with everything you can. So you say full faith and credit of the government. You say in God we trust. You know, if people believed in the Great Pumpkin from Charlie Brown, you know, they put an image of the Great Pumpkin on there in 3D hologram. That's just an attempt to bolster it.
Well, it's certainly being used by the conservatives as a pretense at some moral foundation, and they claim it's the moral foundation of the United States of America. I think we all on this panel would probably very much disagree. Robert Nasir has given us $1.99. Amy, say thank you to Robert for us, even though he's watching and probably could hear me say that himself. James Valiant with $10 says something that I almost said, but I'm glad James says it. The New Testament is also big in favor of slavery. The Catholics even say an atheist can get into heaven as well. Well, that's interesting. Some interesting stuff. I knew that about slavery. Didn't know that Catholics thought an atheist could get into heaven as well. I think that's some form of progress. I sort of I'm with Michael on this. I think that this, and with Amy and with the rest of the cast here, I think that this bodes well in the sense that they are moving in a progressive direction, but ultimately they are irrational, and ultimately I guess this is the only way they can gauge whether or not their morality is working by sticking their finger up in the air and seeing what other people think, which is frightening. It's scary because the right, and the religious right specifically, poses as objective moral people when we all know that that's not true. Very interesting commentary on that, folks. Do we have any final comments? Anybody want to say anything else about that article? The Anglican Church seems to be moving in the right direction for some of the wrong reasons. Amy, yes, what say you?
This is a good indication that we are in a moral vacuum currently in the culture at large in the world, or in the Western cultures. And this is a great opportunity for objectivists to say, there is a third alternative to morality. There's no, don't take consensus, don't look to the Bible, actually understand morality as more of a science, and understand the nature of man and epistemologically how human beings work and how that relates to morality. So, just
that's true.
Yeah.
How very true.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Those people who read Atlas Shrugged and skipped Galt's speech, they need to now go back to Galt's speech and read everything that John Galt talked about morality in there. And that, I think that's a great model for saying, this is the alternative, and Anglican Church, this is what you should do. Not that they're going to actually accept any of those ideas, but yeah, if they want to be more reality focused, if people want to be happier in their lives, obviously Ayn Rand's rational egoism is the only way to go.
I agree with you. Now, Michael, that brings up a question. If our minds, if reason can figure out how to get to Mars, if it can figure out the nature of the universe, why do people think it's insufficient to help us figure out the nature of man and values and morality?
Wow. That might be a little above my pay grade, but I will say this. I think it goes back in part to sort of reasoning and wanting to figure things out. The problem is when we can't figure things out, there's a tendency of some people to plug in the gaps. So when they can't figure out, for instance, well, what's causing the rain? What's causing the snow? What's causing the earthquake? How did we get here? They come up with an explanation. And that explanation for a long time has been God. So I think that that's part of the problem. And superstition obviously is a big part of the problem as well.
Amy, do you have any thoughts about this? Because you said morality is a science, and I agree with you, but it's a peculiar science because it's not something that can be replicated in a laboratory. Like philosophy is a science, but it's a peculiar science, right? It gives us the foundations upon which science rests. So how can we prove that the morality of rational self-interest is really the way to go? And how can we combat this notion that the only way you can get to a real moral standing in the world is through some God?
I think we need to start with the idea that philosophy is actually valid. A lot of people, most people in the world, are turned off by the idea of philosophy because of what they teach in our universities. It's being absolutely absurd and completely nonsensical and entirely irrational and emotionalistic eventually. So yes, we need to promote philosophy as such, as objectivists, and talk about what that is and talk about what those questions are and say, you know what, it's okay to ask these questions, and it's okay to not have all the answers right away, but it's really important for us to look at this, like Michael was saying, as a science, as something that is that's understandable and knowable.
Now, Woz, as a aspiring artist myself, not as a painter, but as an actor and as a teacher of acting, I've been exposed to a lot of anti-intellectualism and irrationalism in schools. Acting schools, they get you off of your mind. They want to get you into your impulses and intuitions, and they think that's your real authentic self. Now, how do we turn this around as artists? I try to never make people enemies of their minds when I'm working with them, but they also have to be free. They can't be in their heads. They have to be in the moment. They have to be performers, as a performer is in the moment. So how do we battle this as artists? Because it's huge in our community. Art comes from your gut. It comes from your viscera. It's not something that you can think about. We battle this all the time. What say you?
Yeah. I agree completely. It comes from people just thinking that there's two separate things, the mind and the body, and that you have to deal with them separately, and to integrate them is impossible. But really what I think it comes down to is how do you prove that reason is involved with art, and it's not just instincts and emotion, although that's heavily involved. You kind of just have to prove it. Make great stuff and explicitly state you did this, it's pretty obvious if you've done it out of reason, because it's planned and everything is integrated and nothing is by mistake. So, because I don't know, those kinds of people are almost impossible to convince, almost like the people that don't believe in free will. It's all along the same camp. They're just on another level that it's hard to reach.
Well, when you reach a state of inspiration or flow when you're working as an actor or a painter, I imagine, it does almost feel like the painting is painting itself. The writing is writing itself. Your character is coming out, it's doing its own thing, and you're sort of just a vehicle, a passive vehicle to it. So I guess that contributes to the difficulty in communicating this kind of stuff to them.
I think too, people don't do enough or know how to introspect properly, so they can't identify where these thoughts or habits is what they really are come into play. Because when I'm painting and stuff, I'm relying a lot on already ingrained habits that I have, and I don't have to consciously think about them. I just set a task for my brain and then let it go. But I can still identify why I make those individual little choices and where they came from and the experiences I had as a creator that bring them about, if I were to introspect on it. But I think a lot of people just look at that as a self-evident, automatic people want things to be automatic. That's just, they want their morality to be spoon-fed automatically. You know, like Amy said, it's a science, but science requires effort and thinking. And so does morality. It's not just a list of rules you have to follow. So then you get the artists that want to just blame rules as the problem and get rid of all of them, or the artists that want to follow a strict, just dogmatic style that has no freedom in it, like you were saying.
Yeah, well said. Well, so now let's move on to this Notting Hill Carnival. I have no idea what this thing is, but apparently it's filled with violence and craziness. Does anybody have any thoughts about this? What do you make of these stabbings and this violence? I mean, we're now in probably the least violent century. Well, the century's young yet, but we're in the least violent years of a long and not very prestigious historical record of extreme violence. So violence has been dropping over the last couple of decades. Murders are down, thefts are down, assaults are down. People don't realize that if they watch Fox News. They think the world is ridden with crime and violence. But here we seem to have an example of the world going crazy again. And certainly if you read newspapers, you're seeing posts all the time about strap hangers in New York City being assaulted and fights breaking out now on the subways and people being attacked with knives. It just seems like it's crazy out there. What do you make of this stuff at this carnival? Amy, do you have any particular thoughts or feelings about?
I had a chance to look into a little bit of it. I don't think any of us here on this panel, unfortunately, is from the UK, or I don't know if anyone has lived there, but
I've only passed Notting Hill on the tube. I've never actually been there.
Exactly. So it's led by the members, because I asked myself, well, who runs this, first of all? It's the British Caribbean community, and it attracts around 2 million people annually, making it one of the world's largest street festivals. And it's a significant event in British, African, Caribbean, and British Indo-Caribbean culture. So sounds like fun, but it does attract around 2 million people. And
so it's carnival. It's like carnival, like Brazil, like Mardi Gras, sort of.
I'm not so
Mardi
sure
Gras-esque.
it's quite like that, but I don't know what their if they have parades or anything like that. Please chime in the chat if you know, because I'm not sure. But that's what I understand, that there were 8 stabbings, I guess, on Monday. And again, in the UK, there are no, at least guns are outlawed. So they use machetes and knives, and and I'm not entirely sure if there's gang violence in that area, and I'm not entirely sure who attends and what their educational background is, and what educational opportunities they have or where they live. But I don't know. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of this. 8 stabbings in 2 million people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, everybody's educated. It's England. It's got a public schooling system, so everybody gets what they want, right? Michael, what say you about this crime wave in Carnival, Nottingham Carnival?
Well, I was really like, wow, like this is a thing. There's this carnival where people go and there's all these stabbings. It seemed a bit bizarre to me. I did not know that it was a Caribbean-based festival. I had no idea. But that raises some questions in my mind. And I'll give an analogy. There was once question to Milton Friedman about why Sweden had so little poverty, and it was a socialist country, and look how little poverty it was. And Milton Friedman responded, well, from what I understand, there aren't that many poor Swedish people in America either. And his point was that the Swedish culture is given to hard work. And the Caribbean countries that I know about, and I don't know about all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but are often very violent places. So I just wonder how much of that culture spills over into this carnival where you've got, millions of people or 2 million people, whatever it is. I don't know. I can't say that is what it is. It's just a question that came into my mind when I heard about it.
Well, it's funny because whenever I talk about the terrors of the welfare state, people say, well, Swedes are the happiest people in the world. And I say they're happier in America, believe it or not. Because, of course, they attribute it to crazy welfare state over there. Keith, what do you think about this? Do you have any opinions about this crime spree in Carnival?
I don't know anything about Notting Hill, but and I don't know if this 8 stabbings a day, you know, when you hear these statistics, they never give you a perspective. They don't say over the last 20 years, the average number of stabbings is X. So you can't get a sense from the headline, is there a trend, or is this just normal and has been normal since, you know, since the dawn of the carnival 50 years ago or whatever. I have no idea. What I do know is that when the economy grinds people down, then you see a great deal more. Obviously, people become stressed. With that comes anxiety. For a lot of people, that turns to anger. For some people, anger turns to rage. And you get all sorts of bad, you know, behaviors. And, you know, make no mistake, this is not the best of times economically. You know, the government destroyed whole sectors of the economy and then papered over it. You know, this is during COVID lockdown. And the lockdown was worse in the UK than it was in most of the US. Papered over it by giving people lots of free money. You know, that's like depriving a patient of sleep and then giving them lots of cocaine. You know, the free money doesn't really undo, and the cocaine doesn't really undo the lack of sleep. It just masks the effect. Now, all the central banks have this cockamamie theory that we have to render some people unemployed so that they can't outcompete the rest of us to buy groceries and other consumer goods. This is their theory, so-called theory of so-called inflation, that they're deliberately trying to render chunks of the population unemployed to get a handle on inflation. And you know, when you hike interest rates, of course, you do get unemployment. And so there are a lot of people that are pretty angry. And whether that's a factor in this particular instance, I can't say because I know nothing about this carnival. But in general, that sort of, if that were on the rise generally across the Western world, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Well, that just opened up a huge Pandora's box, I think. Now, in the Depression, we had monetary issues as well, right? We had easing of credit, which caused a boom, and then the refusal of the Federal Reserve to release money into the system. So very hard money policy that sort of exacerbated things, along with trade and the New Deal, all the crazy governmental things that were happening that were hobbling people's lives for real. But we didn't see this kind of precipitous rise in violence. So I get the sense that crime isn't. Michael, you have something to say about this.
I do. There's actually not much evidence that poor economic times lead to violence. From the 60s to the 90s in America, the poverty rate dropped and crime spiraled out of control. It doesn't mean that there's no connection at all, but I'm just saying it's not as straightforward as is often thought. Like there's not a straightforward connection either between unemployment and crime. There's been studies on it that say no, it's just not the case. So I don't know how bad the economy in England is, but the article that I read that was given to us actually does intimate that they've had this sort of problem at this carnival before. It was the most, I think they said, most stabbings in 7 years, which means 7 years ago there was a lot of stabbings as well.
Yeah. Actually, I just have it here. The rate of knife attacks this year is the highest since the 15 stabbings recorded in 2016. So this is only a little bit more than half of the stabbings that happened in 2016.
Yeah.
So just for some perspective, I think the media is really trying to push this stuff a little bit, you know, forward in the spotlight to make it seem worse. Because like I said before, they talk a lot about San Francisco and California, but California doesn't even make the top 10 in the nation's crime list. So the statistics are all over the place.
Yeah, it seems like the media and the tribes are trying to frighten us and keep us in a state of crisis all the time. This may be a conspiracy theory, but I'm starting to think the right-wing media, crime is out of control. You can't step outside your door without stepping on a crack addict who wants to stab you with a machete. And to the left, the climate is out of control. Look at this crazy hurricane. It's going to be the strongest one in the world, civilized history. It's going to bash through it. It ended up being, what, a category 3, category 2, something like that. They made it seem like it was going to be heating up over the Gulf of Mexico and just destroy the entire peninsula of Florida. It didn't really happen. And that was in the right-wing news too. So we're always put in this place of being in constant crisis by these folks. And I feel like they want us feeling and not thinking. And that, you guys agree with this, or is it just me? Is this just a conspiracy?
No, I think you're right. And I think it's an old thing. It just reminds me, my grandmother toward the end of her life was bedridden. So all she did all day was watch the television. And when I would go out at night, she would say things to me, honey, be careful, make sure you lock all the doors. Like she thought it was this world out there where like you go down the street, you get mugged, you get shot, whatever. And it just wasn't like that. But that was the world that she was taking in because she wasn't exposed to anything else.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's true. If it bleeds, it leads. And if you watch television news, you're going to have a very pessimistic perspective on the world. Well, folks, bringing me to that perspective, it looks like the economic situation is severely limiting people's capacity to hook up. So they're dropping things like clubs and bars from their itinerary, which of course was the major hookup spot for most people. I think now it's probably the internet, Tinder or wherever the hell these people, I don't know where these people go anymore, but so will this lead to a great deal of unhappiness because they can't have casual sex the way they used to? Keith, I'm going to go to you. I'm going to go to you first. What say you?
I have to chuckle at the idea that because you can't go and spend $1,000 on bottle service, you can't have sex if that's what you want. That's just strikes me as just preposterous. Like there are times when economists say things and you just have to shake your head like, does anybody seriously believe this? Or this just sounds good and you get grants to write papers like this. Obviously, if people want casual sex, then there's always been, long before there was such a thing as a club and bottle service, there's always been ways to have casual sex. And
now it's facilitated by internet hookup sites where you don't have to spend a lot of money. You just find people.
It's free on the internet, exactly.
Bang, it's right there.
I think I'm totally with you that the media, both sides, both false alternative sides of it, would give this impression that everything is turning to rack and ruin by tomorrow morning. Civilization is going to collapse, whether due to the climate collapsing or whether due to whatever crime wave. But I do think that there are some very serious underlying structural and therefore chronic problems that people are unhappy, they're stressed. Is it going to be that the economy causes people not to have sex? No. Is the lack of casual sex going to cause unhappiness? I don't think so. But maybe the other way around. If people are stressed and unhappy, they may not be seeking sex as much because sex is a happy thing. And if you're just, stressed out, a lot of people may not turn to sex. They may turn to drugs. They may turn to food. They may turn to whatever. To as a coping mechanism.
Michael, what do you think about this dearth of casual sex? Do you think that's going to make people unhappy?
Oh, I don't know about that. That could go anyway. People could be stressed and not want to have sex, or maybe they get stressed and want to go have sex. I don't know, but I did think that it was a bit silly that they said there was going to be a decline in casual sex because things are too expensive. Because if my Facebook feed and the spam section of my email are any indication, I get all these dating sites sending me all kinds of things. And from people that say things to me like, oh, we really enjoyed the photos you posted. I didn't post any photos. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Or, hey, haven't we met? Like, I get all kinds of stuff like that every day. So I think if people want to go out and hook up, there's plenty of ways to do it. They don't need to be going and spending all kinds of money at the club or whatever the article was saying. I don't remember all the things, but there was quite a few.
Now, keeping on this perspective of the lack of casual sex lead to unhappiness, Rand had a very interesting perspective about promiscuity that I think is very unconventional. She said promiscuity isn't bad because sex is bad. I'm of course paraphrasing. It's bad because sex is too good to give away like that, right? So casual sex makes me think that you're not really connecting with the values of the other person. It's just on a very, very basic, almost animal level. It's a way of lowering the quality of your sex, in my view. And why in the heck would you want to do that unless you're trying to escape something? Amy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so so my thoughts are kind of swirling and kind of integrating these three topics with the church, with the violence, basically the moral vacuum that we're experiencing right now. And first of all, let me just say, I don't think it's ever been the case where people did not, unfortunately, feel like they had to go out to a bar or a dance club and drink a lot in order to have a good time having sex. Which is bizarre to me, because my opinion of finding a date is to go to a library or bookstore is the best place to find a date, or to some other kind of cultural event, and then hang out at the library and read the steamy scenes in the Fountainhead with Rourke and Dominique to each other, but again, I mean, this is, with Ayn Rand's idea or her understanding and her definition of sex, that is too good to just kind of haphazardly go around and stumble into people, inebriatedly, and just not think about who you're having sex with, and not thinking about, what you need as a person, and what romance means to you, and answering all of these questions that you need to answer personally before you start dating, and what kind of partner you're looking for, and what kind of virtues you hold, and what kind of virtues you're looking for in another person. Oftentimes people don't approach it that way. But in this case, people are going to keep experimenting with each other. And I think basically, I think is a good thing. I'd much rather not have people stop having sex. That would not be good. But in this case, you don't need to drink or spend a lot of money to engage in that kind of romantic experience.
Indeed. And just because I'm not for, say, casual sex doesn't mean it can't be recreational and fun and with, people you don't want to marry. That's sort of a different plateau to me. But Woz, what do you think of this?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny article. I like the line in here where it says it is simply too expensive to get to the level of woozy required to fall into someone's car home today.
Oh my God.
How many drinks does it take to sleep with someone that lives in their car, in other words? So if that's the criteria they're starting at, then I guess this is a good thing. It basically comes down to, I guess, fake dates are too expensive now. So good, let's stop fake dating. And, if you're just there to hook up, well, then admit it. Otherwise, get to know the person. But apparently that's too much effort and expense for people nowadays. So
how crazy. What a dismal view of the world the news gives us. The good news is, folks, you can still have fun, recreational, athletic, or whatever kind of sex you want with somebody you like at very low cost. Don't believe that article. Anyway, folks, I think we've exhausted these. Michael, you're like, oh my God, what have I gotten into? I think. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let's integrate these things, I guess. I mean, we're talking about the church and their complete inability to provide guidance about sex in the first place. And actually, the antithesis of that is they've completely screwed with people's minds with regard to the topic. So then you have this culture of, at least with the nightclub and lack of funds for having casual sex, you see that sex and philosophy have a lot to do with each other, that sex and morality in the best way, in the rational way, have a lot to do with each other. And so it's a sad state to see where the church is going, or has taken us to this kind of mind-body dichotomy. And I'm glad that they are trying to reform themselves, at least in England. Rewrite the testaments, I'll just completely revamp it. And I know it's pragmatic of them, and I know they want more bodies in their churches, but overall, it's a good thing that they're reconsidering it, and it's for us as objectivists to reach out to them and to reach out to people in general and say, there's a different way of looking at things and a better way of living, where happiness is actually accessible and the world is knowable.
Wow,
I
that
just
just
wanna
sounds
say-
so crazy. Yes,
I
Ross.
think a lot of what you're seeing too is the way people who hold the mind-body dichotomy deal with being locked in their home for months and not being able to work. I think the lockdowns pushed people who are on any edge over an edge. And after everything was opened up, there's this huge surge of everyone wanting to get back together. You see, people are flying in record numbers and conferences are huge. And, obviously people had a craving to get back together and probably have, one night stands and stuff. But then people are also stressed and the system is stressed. Some of the system has lost its efficiency. So all these little things are coming together to just push people over the edge. And I think that's like the knife thing, and even giving up on Christianity could be part of that, because they're falling more into cynicism after they realize what the government has pulled over on everybody. They just, by and large, people do not trust the authorities anymore. Like, it doesn't matter how leftist you were, even they're even questioning it. People I talk to anyway.
Well, that's good. People are starting to take back their moral agency. And folks, there is a solution to the cynicism out there. It's called objectivism. That's not a religious proclamation. That is my sense. Explore it for yourself and see if it works the same way for you as it does for me. Well, folks, we have upcoming shows, 10 p.m. UK time, Cutting Edge on Is Everything Physical? Is everything physical? Sounds interesting. I have some thoughts about that. I know they will. They'll unpack that. Guys, it's been super cool doing this panel with you guys. We had some really interesting, somewhat uncomfortable even articles to pursue, but it was fun, challenging. I learned some things from you. I hope you learned some things from me. And I guess we're going to call it a day here at the reality show. So unless anybody has any final comments, I am going to say,
can I say something about the
Yes.
promiscuity thing?
Yes.
I think that promiscuity in anything intimate, not just sex, but friendships, relationships, I think it's bad because it's a lack of standards. And I think a big part of it is the motivation. Why are people promiscuous? And it's a lot of time because it's a craving of acceptance or wanting to be liked. And I don't think that that's ever a good primary motivation. I think we all want to be liked and we all want to, have pleasure. But when it's trying to basically be self-confirmation at the, by gaining friendships or gaining relationships or having sex, then I think it becomes a real problem.
Indeed. Wait, let me just give a shout out to Ashley Shrug. Don't give it up to the dirty collectivists. I agree with you. I don't remember the context that was in, but I agree with the sentiment entirely. And Michael, I like that comment on promiscuity. I feel the same way about addictions in general. Addictions are a way of evading. Promiscuity is sort of a way, is a form of evasion too, or social metaphysics. We're trying to get your self-esteem from somebody else, but trying to run away from truths inside you too by doing that. So folks, let's confront reality as it is. Let's stand boldly in the face of it and say, this is so. And go with it, man. Go with the laws of nature. Go with your own human nature, and you will be much happier. Anyway, folks, that's it for the reality show today. Always remember to check your premises, and I'll see you later. Peace.